Hi you guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I just want to say quickly that this year is crazy for missing persons cases, and in a very good way. So many cold cases are being solved. Not only did they capture Irons, they also arrested somebody in the murders for Ashley Freeman and Laura Bible, but they also identified a famous John Doe named Lyle Stevick. This was a 16-and-a-half-year-old cold case. It was heartbreaking to read up on that case, and he was just unidentified for 16-and-a-half years, and he was just identified by the DNA Doe Project, which is an organization that was created to help identify Jane and John Doe so that they could be reunited with their families. It is absolutely incredible. The Lyle Stevick case was one of their first cases, and it led to them identifying him. So the family has chosen to remain anonymous. If you don't know his real name, that is understandable, but it's just crazy to think about how DNA is becoming more and more crucial in solving these cases. It's crazy how far we have come with our technology to be able to do all of this stuff, and so it just is extremely hopeful. I think that DNA is really going to lead to cases being solved. It's going to lead to murderers finally being brought to justice. It's incredible to think about, and so I just wanted to say that really quick because I put off doing this case for a while, because the case that I'm doing today, because it is one of those cases that does not make any sense. And when I first heard about it and researched it, I just was so baffled by it that I was just like, I can't even tackle that case because there's no evidence and it just doesn't make any type of sense. But when I'm seeing all of these cold cases being solved and all of this amazing technology advancing, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to tell this story. Even though we don't know a whole lot about what happened on that day, we do have theories, and I think that if we have a conversation about this case, I think that maybe it could lead to something happening. You never really know. So that is why today I wanted to talk about the very, very, very strange disappearance of Jason JOLKOWSKI. Jason Anthony JOLKOWSKI was born on June 24th, 1981 in Grand Island, Nebraska to his parents Jim and Kelly. He had one younger brother named Michael, and the family eventually relocated to Omaha, Nebraska, which is about 150 miles away from Grand Island. Growing up, Jason was described as a sweet kid who rarely caused any problems. His mother said that even as he hit his teens, when you usually kind of see some rebellion from your kids, that Jason rarely caused problems and was extremely close with his family. He was also described as being very trusting and even gullible at times. Jason volunteered at his local church, and he absolutely loved sports. His mother Kelly said that he was basically a walking sports dictionary, and that you could ask him any question about any sport and that Jason would most likely know the answer. She said that he could tell you who won the World Series in 1952. Like, he was just very knowledgeable on sports, and he absolutely loved everything about sports. Jason went to high school at Omaha Benson High School and was a very good student. But Jason did have some learning disabilities. It was very difficult for him to process language quickly, and it was also difficult for him to process multiple things at one time. Due to this, he was unfortunately bullied by his classmates while he was in school. However, Jason was an optimist. He continued to work very hard in school, got good grades, he got his driver's license, and he took on a part-time job. Jason was not the type of person to let his learning disabilities define him or hold him back, and he was definitely the type of person that was going to chase after his passions and go after what he really wanted in life. After graduating from high school, Jason was a part-time student at a local community college where he enrolled in their radio broadcasting program. He was extremely passionate about radio broadcasting and definitely wanted to learn more about it. His mother Kelly was a little bit surprised by this decision because it was difficult for him to process a lot of information at once, but she was extremely proud of him because, again, Jason was not the type of person to let his disabilities hold him back, and he really wanted to pursue his passion. The community college that Jason attended had their own radio station, and as a part of the curriculum, the students that were in the radio broadcasting program had to develop a radio persona. At the beginning, Jason hit a few bumps and initially was a little bit rocky. However, he quickly found his footing and eventually developed a following. Jason just had a natural gift, and he was super excited about exploring the world of broadcasting even more. When Jason wasn't at school or working, he spent his time with his family and a handful handful of close friends. Due to his shy nature, Jason wasn't the type of person that really tried to pursue social activities, and he was completely content with hanging around people that were already close to him. When he went missing, Jason was just 19 years old, living at home, and was working at Fazoli's, which was an Italian fast food restaurant that was nearby. He'd worked there for quite some time, but he was ready to move on and was extremely excited about a new job that he was starting the following week. June 13th, 2001 started off like any other normal day. Jason's parents, Jim and Kelly, were at work, and Jason was spending the morning at home with his younger brother, Michael. At some point that morning, Jason was called into work early. However, Jason's car was in the shop and he did not have any transportation. He offered to walk to his job, however, his place of work arranged for a female coworker to pick him up and give him a ride. Since Jason wasn't the best at giving directions, he told her to meet him at his former high school, Omaha Benson High School, which was about 8 blocks away from his home and was much easier to find. Jason knew the route to the high school like the back of his hand because he always walked to Omaha Benson while he was a student there. Right before leaving, Jason offered to help his younger brother out, and he took the trash cans from the sidewalk and into the garage, which was confirmed by a neighbor who saw him doing so at 10:45 a.m. Jason was wearing a Chicago Cubs or Sammy Sosa t-shirt, a blue Chicago Cubs hat, black pants, and black shoes, and was also carrying his red work shirt when he left home and began to walk the 8 blocks towards his former high school. Jason was never seen or heard from again. He left behind $650 in his bank account that has never been touched. He has never used his ATM card or his cell phone, and he never retrieved his vehicle that was still at the repair shop. When the female coworker arrived at Omaha Benson High School and realized that Jason was running late, she grew concerned. Since it was 2001, cell phones weren't as popular and they weren't as common, so she had to go to a nearby gas station, and she called Fazoli's from a payphone. She asked them if she should wait a little bit longer or if she should head back into work. They told her to wait a little bit longer to see if Jason would turn up, but Jason never turned up. Shortly after that, Jason's work called the JOLKOWSKI home phone and asked if Jason was there. They asked if everything was okay. They were wondering why he didn't show up for his ride. And that was when his younger brother Michael said that he last saw Jason leaving the house and heading to the high school to go to work. It was clear at this point that something was off. Later that afternoon, Jim and Kelly were called and notified that Jason had not shown up for work. To them, it was very strange. It wasn't like Jason to just not show up to work, and they immediately felt that something was off. When the police arrived, they initially thought, like in so many cases, that Jason was a runaway or that he would most likely turn up. Maybe he wanted to get away for a couple of days, maybe he just wanted to leave his life for a bit, and that he would just show back up. Kelly said in an interview that the police wasted crucial hours that could have been spent searching for Jason. She also went on to say that it took the police 10 full days to actually realize that Jason was not a runaway and that something was horribly wrong. So in other words, it took the police 10 full days to even start investigating the case. When they traced the route that Jason walked, there was absolutely no sign of evidence of a struggle taking place. Nobody heard anything. Nobody reported any suspicious vehicles in the neighborhood that day. And nobody saw Jason that morning aside from the neighbor who saw him leave his home at around 10:45 a.m. They began to canvass the area around Jason's home, and they even walked from Jason's home to his workplace, and they did not find any valuable evidence. A veteran detective with over 30 years of experience under his belt that was initially assigned to the case said that the case was the most baffling and confounding case that he had ever worked. There were no suspects, there were no leads, there was no sign of a crime even taking place. There was no Jason. The police followed up on the female coworker that was supposed to give Jason a ride, and they followed up with everyone that worked at Jason's place of work. However, it did not lead them anywhere. The police then began to focus on a man that Jason had worked with at his previous job. Apparently, this man, who was a lot older, was known for inviting younger men over to his home to hang out. The police looked into it. They weren't able to establish any link to Jason's disappearance, and they were again back at square one. The police turned to Jason's neighborhood, which was a little bit complicated. Even though Jason lived in a very nice area of the neighborhood, it had an interesting layout. According to his mother, Kelly, you could be in a nice section of the neighborhood, go down 5 blocks in one direction, and then end up in an area that was in decline and in an area that was more unsafe. However, she did say that the route that Jason would have took would have been in the safe part of the neighborhood, and that she herself would walk that route in the daytime as well. So it wasn't like it was super dangerous. It wasn't like it was you know, in a really horrible part of the neighborhood. She said that the route that he would have taken would have been nice, it would have been safe, and again, Jason had walked to the high school several times while he was a student there. When the police began to look into the neighborhood more thoroughly, they discovered that there were multiple registered sex offenders that lived in the area. They followed up with all of these offenders, and again, nothing really came of it. In an interview, Kelly mentioned that one of the sex offenders lived by a park that Jason most likely would have passed on his way to the high school, but again, after the police followed up with this man, they were not able to link him to Jason's disappearance. How did Jason literally vanish into thin air on the morning of June 13th, 2001 between 10:45 and 11:30 a.m. without a trace or a single piece of evidence being left behind? Since there is literally no trace of Jason and not one single piece of evidence that was left behind, it's really hard to start anywhere on this case because anything could have happened to Jason. However, it's hard to say that anything could have happened to Jason because he went missing in such a small time frame in a residential area that he was familiar with in broad daylight. When I first heard of this case and did more thorough research on it, I immediately felt that Jason met with foul play and that whoever harmed him was most likely somebody that he knew or somebody that he at least knew in passing, and that it was a crime of opportunity. I do and always have believed that the answer lies in Jason's neighborhood. However, there are several theories that are floating around about this case, and I'll talk about some of the ones that I saw most often. The first theory is that Jason chose to leave his life. Although his family and law enforcement does not believe this is what happened, his mother Kelly said that it is a possibility because there's been no evidence that's proved that Jason is no longer alive. It's possible that Jason decided to leave his life, but why? He was extremely excited about the new job that he was going to be starting the following week. He had a very good relationship with his family and friends. He was very close with them. He didn't have a history of depression or mental illness, and he had never run away before. If he did leave, Jason would have left with only the clothes on his back. Again, there was never any activity on his cell phone. There was never any activity in his bank account. He left behind $650. He never retrieved his car from the shop. And if he was running away, you'd think that he would want to take at least the money with him to help him start a new life. If Jason really did choose to go missing, where did he go and how did he get there? His parents estimated that he had about $60 on him on the day that he went missing at most. That's like a generous estimate. So if he went missing, is it possible that he could have gone missing and stayed missing for all of these years with pretty much zero resources? Going missing and completely disappearing from your own life is not easy to do. Sure, back in 2001, it probably would have been easier than it would be now, but it's still very difficult to do. A lot of people think that like, oh yeah, they just chose to go missing. It's very hard to just completely erase who you are and disappear from your life, especially if you have a whole network surrounding you like Jason did. He had a family that was very close to him. It would not have been very easy for him to just simply disappear. Making yourself disappear takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of planning ahead of time, and I just don't see how that would fit into Jason deciding to go missing on his way to work when he knows that he has a ride waiting for him that would most likely, you know, signal the alarm at some point pretty quickly when she realized that he wasn't going to be showing up. Jason loved his family and was close to them. He had a bunch of exciting opportunities ahead of him. He was exploring his passion in radio broadcasting and was doing very well at it. So why would he choose to leave all of that behind? The second theory is that Jason was the victim of a hit and run and that whoever hit him took his body and disposed of it elsewhere, which is why he has never been found to this day. However, my issue with this theory is that there would most likely be some type of evidence that would be left behind. I imagine that there would be angry tire marks on the road from someone slamming their brakes trying to not hit Jason. I imagine that there would be a lot of noise, a lot of commotion. I would also imagine that there would be some blood present from injuries that Jason would have sustained if he had been hit by a vehicle going at a relatively high speed. However, no evidence like that was found when the police canvassed the area, and they did do a pretty thorough canvass of the neighborhood, so I would think that they would have spotted something if there was a hit and run type of scenario. Jason went missing in broad daylight. He was 6'1" and weighed around 190 pounds. So it'd be very difficult for you to not see him, right? He's 6'1". Also, if it was the case of a hit and run, why would the driver take the body with them? In most hit and run cases, the driver immediately flees the scene. They don't want to have anything from the scene with them because there's more probability that evidence will be linked back to them. I also find it very unlikely that this person would have been able to get Jason, again, who's 6'1", into their vehicle without somebody noticing or hearing something. In my opinion, you also have to think about what your mindset would be if you actually hit somebody with your vehicle. I imagine that you would panic and it would turn into a fight or flight situation, and that you would most likely want to flee and get out of the area and not sit and take the time to take that person's body with you and be in the scene longer than you needed to be. I mean, I don't know, I've never been in that situation, thank God, but if you put yourself in that type of mindset, I would think that you would absolutely panic. And, you know, most people that are good people would take the right steps, which is the moral step, which would be to call the police. But in this scenario, this person would have taken the time to move his body, put it into their car, and leave. So I don't know why they'd even fuss with that. I just see them leaving and getting out of there as soon as possible. It's always possible that somebody might have hit Jason and that the injuries were not fatal. Maybe they panicked and offered to take him to a nearby hospital and took him somewhere else instead. Again, even in that scenario, if somebody accidentally hit him and the injuries were minor, I still feel like there would have been some evidence left behind, and I feel like Jason would have utilized his cell phone. I feel like there would have been some activity on his cell phone, and there was not. The third theory is that a bully or bullies who Jason had dealt with in high school maybe came across him, heckled him for whatever reason, and it went too far. As always, this is possible. However, at the time of his disappearance, Jason had already been out of high school for 2 years and moved on from the entire situation, and I'm assuming that the bullies that he had dealt with had moved on as well at that point. When Jason was bullied in high school, his mother Kelly said that he never really talked about anyone in particular. It wasn't like he was talking about the same person bothering him every day or anything like that. It was more of a universal thing, if that makes any type of sense. So they never, you know, threatened to harm him. They never got physical with him or anything to that effect. If it was people that Jason had known from high school, they would have run into him by complete chance. And if they did, why would they harm Jason? What would the motive be for taking him? You know, again, like anything, it's always possible, but this one never really rung true to me whenever I looked at the case, but again, you know, anything is honestly possible. The fourth theory is that somebody from Jason's place of work was responsible for his disappearance. And when you look at the case in general, that would make the most sense, right? Because Jason goes missing on the only day that he is walking and heading to work. Jason always drove. He never walked to work. He never walked to meet anybody for a ride or anything like that. The only reason why he was walking that day was because his car was in the shop. Jason never ever walked to work, and he never walked to meet anybody to give him a ride to work. Again, he always drove, and if he didn't drive, his parents would always pick him up or drop him off. If it was somebody from his work, they would have most likely known what time he was walking, and they would have known the area in which he was walking because his workplace had set up the whole thing for his female coworker to pick him up and give him a ride. However, according to his mother Kelly, law enforcement has thoroughly and aggressively approached this angle. They have investigated it. They've talked to everybody that worked at Fazoli's, and they have never been able to link anybody at Jason's place of work to his disappearance. Jason did not have any known enemies at work. He avoided confrontation. He was very good at his job, and he was friendly with everybody. The fifth theory is that whoever is responsible for Jason's disappearance is also responsible for the disappearance of another local young man named Samuel Sherman. Samuel Sherman had gone to a job interview and failed to return back to the place where he was staying, which was in the 3600 block of Bedford Avenue, which was about a block from where Jason lived. He was also 19 years old and went missing on July 19th, 2001, which was a little over a month after Jason vanished. What's odd about the Samuel Sherman case is that there's truly no information about it at all. There are no details on his life, his disappearance, his family, where he was staying, what job interview he was going to. There's not even a photo of him available online. All we have is a very vague description. According to his profile on NamUs, Samuel had blonde hair, blue eyes, was about 5'7" and weighed around 160 pounds. Aside from that, we don't have really anything else, and the media did not cover his case whatsoever. It's almost as if Samuel Sherman didn't even exist. However, someone reported him missing, so who did? Is it possible that there was some sort of predator that was targeting young men in that area? Is it possible that the two disappearances are somehow linked? When you do look at the two cases, it does seem highly suspicious. They were the same age, disappeared in the same area around the same time, and were both in the process of doing something job-related. Jason was on his way to work while Samuel was on his way to a job interview. Or is it just a tragic coincidence? Jason's mother, Kelly, does not believe that the two cases are linked, and it's unknown if law enforcement has thoroughly looked into a possible connection. I'm assuming that they have, and I'm assuming that if they did do that, that they weren't able to find anything. I feel like they would have mentioned it somehow. I don't know if they would have given out every single detail, but I feel like if they looked into it and did find a link, they would most likely release that to the public, but they have not. So I'm assuming that they looked into it and that there's nothing there. Again, they could always be holding everything back for whatever reason, and maybe there is a connection there. The sixth theory is that a neighbor is responsible for Jason's disappearance. I think that this is the most likely scenario. Like I said before, I think that whoever took Jason knew him in some way and was very familiar with the neighborhood and the overall area. Again, since Jason did not normally walk to his job and him walking to the high school was a one-time type of thing, this would have been a crime of opportunity. I think it's definitely possible that a neighbor who knew Jason or knew of him saw him walking that day and lured him into their home or somehow got him into their vehicle. I think this person was known to Jason because, again, there was no signs of a struggle and nobody heard any commotion that day. And when I say known to Jason, I don't mean like know him. I don't think that they knew him and talked to him every single day, but I do think it's possible that Jason knew them in passing or just from being in the neighborhood for a long time. Maybe they just knew of Jason from throughout the years. This person could have developed a fascination or obsession with him from a distance. Jason was a very trusting person, and his mother described him as gullible at times. I think that a neighbor who was familiar with Jason or the family in some capacity might have known this, and also about his learning disabilities. They could have seen him walking and used it as their chance. They could have asked Jason to help them with something really quick in their home. They could have offered Jason a ride even though the walk wasn't that long. I mean, predators are extremely persuasive, charming, manipulative, and they concoct really believable stories. I think it's possible that this person could have said anything, really. They could have made up any type of excuse, or they could have, feigned being hurt or asked for help or, whatever, really. They could have said anything. Jason, wanting to be helpful, could have agreed to help them with something very quickly in their home, or Jason, wanting to be polite, accepted their ride offer even though he didn't have that far to walk. I don't think Jason would have gotten into the car with a random stranger, and neither does his family who knows him the best. However, if it was a familiar face that he had seen around the neighborhood or throughout the years, or someone he had talked to in passing, I think it could be a very different story. Or it's very possible that someone from the area took a much more direct approach. Maybe they saw him walking, got into their vehicle and pulled up, maybe had a gun pointed at him and told him to get into the car. Even though Jason was no small guy, size doesn't really matter if you have a deadly weapon pointed at you. When we look at those scenarios, it's easy to say, oh, well, we would do this or that, or we would fight, or we wouldn't get in, but we don't really know how we would react unless we were actually in those situations, which hopefully none of us have been. Thank God most people have not been in that situation, but you have to think about if you were in that situation, how would you really react? In that type of situation, you're required to make life or death decisions in the span of a couple of seconds. If he was approached by a gun, that imagery alone would be a lot coming into his brain. And I'm assuming if he was approached, and this, just as a theory, but if that happened, and not only does he have a gun pointed at him, but I'm assuming that an abductor would be saying words to him. So that would also be coming into his brain as well. And if we remember, Jason had a very difficult time with having a lot of things coming in all at once. He had a lot of difficulties with processing a lot of information at one time. So that would be almost like information overload. It's possible that he became paralyzed by fear in that situation. It's possible that he just listened to whatever his abductor told him and was kind of on autopilot. Maybe he was still trying to process and register everything. Out of both scenarios, I tend to think that Jason was lured into a home because there were no sightings of Jason after his disappearance. He was never seen in a vehicle, and if you just think about it, it would be a lot easier for the predator, if it was a neighbor, to conceal Jason in their home. The police didn't search every home in that neighborhood, obviously, because they didn't have probable cause. Is it possible that Jason was in one of those houses in the hours after he went missing and then was taken out of the area at a later time? For me, the biggest question in this theory is, what would the motive be for a neighbor to just want to abduct him? It obviously wasn't robbery. The kid had maybe 60 bucks on him at the time, and his ATM card was never utilized after his disappearance. I highly doubt that it had anything to do with drugs, because Jason was absolutely not involved in that scene whatsoever. It could have been a perpetrator, like I said before, who developed some sort of interest in Jason and would most likely know his schedule in a general sense. Maybe he didn't know he'd be walking for sure that day. Obviously, this person probably wouldn't know that, but they maybe saw him and took that as their opportunity. Jason was a really good looking guy. It's very possible that he caught someone's interest and that person had bad intentions. Or the perpetrator could have done it for no reason at all. We've seen this plenty of times in different cases. Some cases that come to mind are the Alyssa Bustamante case, where she literally provided no motive. She just said that she wanted to know what it felt like to kill another human being. Or Israel Keys, who said that when he was questioned, he was asked, why do you kill? He said, why not? He didn't really have a motive either. Sometimes there just really isn't a motive, and sometimes it just doesn't make any sense for why somebody, it never really makes sense if you think about it, but in the killer's mind, they have a reason. But sometimes the offender just doesn't even have a reason, and they just do it. Or, now that I'm thinking about it, and I'm kind of thinking back to the Eron's case, I just jotted down some notes on my own theory, which is probably not even anything, but maybe somebody pulled up in a cop car or pulled up with a phony badge and said something to the effect of, hey, I just talked to your parents, look, you need to come with me right now, I'm going to take you to them. Again, for somebody like Jason, who had difficulties with processing a lot of information and language, that would be a lot. Maybe he just got in, he saw the badge, it's law enforcement, in his mind he's gonna, listen to what they have to say. Maybe it was too much for him to register all at once, perhaps. I think that could definitely be a possibility. To me, that would explain why there was no signs of a struggle, why nobody necessarily heard anything, why nothing was suspicious. Maybe that could have happened. Ted Bundy actually did that with one of his victims. I actually played her in a television show, and he told her that he was law enforcement, that he needed to take her down to the station, and she was extremely smart and believed him. He was, again, charming, charismatic, believable, and she got into his car, and, he attacked her, and thank God she survived and escaped him, but maybe that's what happened with Jason. This is honestly one of those cases that just makes zero sense. Jason literally vanished into thin air, and I know I say that a lot with missing persons cases, and they do, but usually there is some piece of evidence that is left behind that shows that they were at least there. In Jason's case, nothing was left behind. There was no physical evidence. It truly is like he just vanished into thin air. His family has been searching for answers for decades, and his case has completely baffled law enforcement. I don't even think they know where to even start in Jason's case. I truly think that they are baffled and have no idea. Jason's parents, Jim and Kelly, turned their grief and sorrow into action and created a nonprofit called Project Jason, which assists families of missing persons and works to prevent more abductions from taking place. They've provided resources and education and helped thousands of families who have a missing loved one. I do want to say that while I was researching this case, I'm going to look down for a little bit at my notes because it has numbers and stuff, but one online user did mention an unidentified body that was discovered 30 minutes away from where Jason disappeared. Obviously, not much is known about this person, but they believe that the remains belong to a white male. On NamUs, this person's case number is 17438. I do know that users have submitted Jason's name, but it's not confirmed if the police have actually looked into it or if they've been able to rule Jason out or not. Since Jason went missing on June 13th, 2001, there have been no major developments in his case, and not one single person of interest or suspect has been named by law enforcement. It's time for Jason to be brought home, and it's time for his family to receive the answers that they deserve. If you have any information about Jason's disappearance, please contact the Omaha Police Department at 402-444-5657. Somebody knows something. Somebody knows what happened. I have a very hard time believing that nobody saw anything that day. It's possible that people just don't remember. Again, it took police 10 days to start to actively investigate the case. It's very possible that people did see something, but they forgot about it by the time the police questioned them. I just hope that somebody remembers something and comes forward so that his family finally receives, some answers, because they literally have nothing. Most families in these types of situations have some sort of idea about what might have happened to their loved one, but in this case, they have no idea what happened to Jason whatsoever. Jason left to go to work. It was a normal day. He left to go to his job and was never seen or heard from again. How does that happen? Anyways, I have let you know what I think kind of happened. There are several theories floating around about the case, but I am interested to hear what you think about this case. Do you think that Jason left and started a new life? Do you think a neighbor was involved? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up for me, and don't forget to subscribe, because I will be posting more videos like this in the upcoming weeks. And don't forget to follow me on social media. I always am asking questions on there, and I will leave all of that stuff down below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys on my next one. Bye.